Hello, everyone. This is Artful Cosm Dust. Now, I was really happy with my latest video, and so with that out of the way, I thought I would actually make my own vlog. I don't really know if there will be a speed paint in the background or what footage I will use. So I guess the best way to describe what these videos are, and full credit to EmilyArtful, she inspired many things including my name. This video is sort of like Sketchbook Storytime, but unlike Sketchbook Storytime, it kind of blends art and writing. It's not gonna have any drawings yet because I do not have a tripod. I am tired. I haven't been in drawing mood, so I don't really have any good footage to show, unfortunately. So I might have to have some annoying basic royalty-free type stuff for the first kind of videos. So after I made my first video, I was going to go and take a break and just watch YouTube videos until I noticed there was one thing that I really wanted to do now that I have my channel I'm actually interested in set up. And that is, I want to talk about a character I have created. His name is Night Stalker. And not the Richard Ramirez Night Stalker, just Night Stalker. I know that can be a bit touchy. I will be blunt and say that I chose the name Night Stalker because it sounded cool. That was the only reason. I know Night Stalker is usually associated with a real person and with real victims, so bear in mind I'm choosing Night Stalker as a temporary name because once the story is published, I want to be sensitive to the real victims of the real Richard Ramirez. Night Stalker at points was also inspired by Richard Ramirez, though he was far from the majority of his characterization. So yeah, I'm just making it clear that I'm not like the kinds of people that think of true crime in terms of Jeffrey Dahmer. That's just not me, so I don't know, I'm just not one of those kinds of fangirls. I think a lot about real victims of real crimes, and that's kind of why I am changing his name. It's also not a perfect name anyways. So, who is Night Stalker? What is he all about? What's happening? So, Night Stalker is, basically a character that I have had since I was a kid. And to give full disclaimer, I kind of first made him as a brainchild during the whole, like, creepypasta thing that went on. Oh wow, the creepypasta thing, as if not everyone knows that. And as far as creepypasta things go, I have a lot of really cringy OCs that I would love to have a video on, which I will simply call the worst creepypasta OCs ever created. And I am doing that because as a YouTuber, I have to have a clickbait title. So yeah, Night Stalker. Yeah, I have to say that even though Slenderman is the start of the brainchild thing, he kind of is inspired by a lot more than that. Essentially, I got inspired by the characters of Slenderman, Cabadath from Trilby's Notes, the Joker, which I know is a bit cringy because the Joker is kind of a meme now, Jeff the Killer, and I know that's gonna be really cringeworthy, but thankfully he's not much like Jeff anymore, if anyone with a spine in good writing's concerned, and a few other characters which I kind of forgot about. So that's where he started. When I was like a little kid and stuff, I just saw them creepypastas and I was like, hey, I'm gonna do that too. So like, I just did it, and that's kind of where he came from. I'm not gonna go into much more detail than that because, again, this isn't really a personal channel. It's really only a story time because I tell a story, but I'm gonna do it in like an impersonal way. It's just about the characters, man. Not much else. So anyways, like, Night Stalker from all of those types of things became a lot more complex. So what Night Stalker is that he is in the fictional species that I created called Creperum. And what a Creperum is, it's like a ghost, but the ghost is made of darkness itself. They are also eternally haunted. They are also part insects, and like they're kind of aliens, but also not. If that sounds bad, I'm sorry. I haven't finished developing it yet. So anyways, like, okay. So Night Stalker is in the story where there is a character, and the main character is named Phase Shifter. Now, who is Phase Shifter? Well, Phase Shifter is like a guy who is just trying to do the right thing. But then he gets kidnapped. But he gets kidnapped like as a kid, so he doesn't really remember. Then he is forced to be some sort of Frankenstein's abomination. But what's weird is that he is not fully dead nor undead. He's in the middle. I cannot say much more than that without spoiling my whole story. So if you want to see the rest, give me money when it comes out. Totally not shilling. So, anyways, yes, Phase Shifter is the main character. Night Stalker is one of the antagonists. Kurthin, the guy who kidnaps him, is also one of the antagonists. There's also this other guy who's Night Stalker's dad, and his name is a Krolstick. A Krolstick is like a really bad guy. If you can't tell, I am basically doing what Jello Apocalypse does, but to my own work. Very original. And I'm only doing that because if I don't give a basic silly summary, this will take forever. So the basic lead stuff is that we know Phase Shifter is a new Creperum because he is technically both human and Creperum, but the audience is supposed to know that, but not him. I will try to not make this arc as cringy as Hunter x Hunter or other arcs to where the audience knows something that the main character does not. And yeah, a lot of the stories from Phase Shifter's eyes and perspective. Kurthin is essentially his captor and abuser, which is why Kurthin is called the primary antagonist or villain. Night Stalker is a sub-antagonist or villain. Finally, going back to Night Stalker's character, which I will try my best to explain in a non-spoiler fashion because I basically gave you the premise of the novel, but not the actual story parts because that would spoil it and ruin it! So, anyways, like, okay, so here is basically what happens, my guys. Night Stalker is sort of born sometime in the 19th century. He is an old-fashioned kind of Creperum. Now, in the Creperum society, and yes, there's a Creperum society because of course there fucking is, they basically exist to where, unlike humans, they're sort of like, basically, it's like spiritual insect logic in how they exist. So, with insects, they have an incredibly short childhood, and then they plop out as adults. And that's kind of how Creperum work. But instead of them being insects in a more literal way, it's like basic spirit logic. And I know that might sound bad, spirit science, in my own book, but hey, spirit science in a fictional work is just lore. It doesn't need to make sense. I'm really sorry, I'm probably cutting myself short. I mean, if I have any beta readers who want to criticize me to the death in the comment section, that's fine, but the problem is I can't have the story actually spoiled or else no one will read it. So if you really, really want to argue with me on how that doesn't make any sense, then read my book. Read it. Become a beta reader. Become a beta reader today! Yay! Okay, so yeah, that's basically it in terms of how Creperum exists. So Night Stalker had the same thing, but he came from his dad. I don't really know how he'll be born yet because that wasn't written yet, but my idea is that his dad will has like starfish like logic to where the Creperum are basically like insects combined with starfishes, but if this was all spiritual bullshit. So my idea is that you cut part of his soul off and then it just created him and he just became a little baby that existed. So that is the idea for the starting point. After he is born in the 1900s, he talks to his dad, aka Acrostic, and I have the idea in the story, which I will be very surface level on the arc because why would I ruin my entire arc? So his dad is basically meant to be abusive, but he's more so abusive because he's obsessed with having the perfect child, and he thinks his son isn't perfect. Why does he think his son is not perfect? Well, now we can go into Night Stalker himself and his personality. So, Night Stalker is basically a spoiled brat. He is born in the Crepera monarchy system, and he is spoiled. But he's also really fucked up because, like I said, the Creperum are like insects combined with starfish, combined with like spiritual shit, combined with ghosts or phantoms in particular, and they're all faceless because they don't have an identity. But they're faceless in a way to where their like faces glow in like a haunting spectral way, and they're made out of darkness. So basically they come out of the theoretical womb really fucked up. So he's kind of just a narcissist that hates everyone, and he doesn't get along with anyone. His closest mentor is this guy named Sepulchral, who's sort of meant to be like the guy that has his best interests in mind, because since in my story, the Creperum society are close to extinction, they care about any young ones that are born, but other than him being young, they don't give a flying fuck about him. So Night Stalker develops societal issues, and he also develops daddy issues because his daddy always neglects him. And that's the starting point for his story, which I cannot go into detail, because if I do, it will ruin everything. Okay. So, yeah. Afterwards, it's just sort of like Night Stalker is just kind of there, like he just shows up. And the reason there's a contrast is because Night Stalker is meant to, well, have a blank out point, and he's brought back later, so he kind of just disappears, but then he comes back in the year 2020, our Lord 2020, and COVID doesn't exist in this universe because why the fuck would it? So that doesn't happen. Instead, what happens is that he goes on a rampage and decides to kill a bunch of people, but Phase Shifter has conflicts with him. So yeah, that kind of helps understand him. Again, no spoilers. So his personality, once he's brought back, is the important thing, because once he's brought back, he's a lot more mature than when he was a little kid. Or kid thing, because he was an adult even back then. But yeah, basically, it's like if he goes from 18 to like 20 years old is the idea. So, I will try to describe the best what he is like. At this part of the story, basically, Night Stalker is kind of made to be more like, cold-hearted. And by cold-hearted, I mean that he has seen some real shit. Because this is part of the synopsis to where it's not technically a spoiler, Acrostic just dies. But also, is he dead? Ooh. So yeah, a huge part of the mystery is, one, is Acrostic dead? Second, if he is dead, given how they're all phantoms, could he be brought back? So it's also a mystery like, how did he die? Because no one knows, and I am not spoiling it. So basically, Night Stalker realizes when he comes back that his dad is gone. And the most that he finds is some sort of note, which gives him these very cryptic instructions. Acrostic, based on the name, quite literally means puzzle. That is his name, he's a puzzling person. Acrostic has many different types of associates, and Acrostic is a part of the story's metaphysical cult, which is still not finished yet. Acrostic mostly works alone, but the plotline that I have is that Acrostic essentially has to, like, fight different types of forces, and that he himself was based on two beings which were created from some sort of, like, occultic ritual. So, essentially, Night Stalker has all these questions. He doesn't know what happened to his dad. He's just wondering to himself what's going on in his life, and for the first time in a while, Night Stalker has a panic attack because the last he remembers, he was giving the middle finger to his dad, essentially, and now his dad is gone. Now, canonically from Night Stalker's perspective, which actually isn't written, which is why I'm going to allow this to be in a video, because it gives insight on a character which is technically canon, but won't be in the story because it's not from, you know, his perspective. Canonically, what actually happens during this pivotal scene is that there are several moments to where Night Stalker is shocked and doesn't believe it. The mental image in my head is sort of like the whole Bambi looking for his mother thing, but a lot more adult and a lot more twisted. Like, he's just calling Acrostic's name, and he just feels empty inside the more he realizes that he can't find him. Like, imagine he's in some sort of wilderness area, because that's where he's reborn. He's like in a wilderness area and in this hidden underground house, because that's where Acrostic last lived before he perished. He's just sort of going in this wilderness over and over and over again, trying to find his father, calling his name, feeling himself sort of just entrenched in the void, unable to find much of anything. Eventually, the more he keeps going on, he realizes just how dull and just how empty it all is. How much nothing matters. And potentially he commits suicide, though because the story has to continue, that doesn't happen. So the more he tries to find his dad, it kind of leads into a maniacal sort of psychotic mental breakdown. And that's when he himself has the plan to try to find his father no matter what it takes. And that's kind of the start of his arc. The main thing he wants is to find his father, but he's also just really trying to find himself. He just feels really uncertain in his actions, and rather than being a typical serial killer, he's someone who is raised by royalty in such a monarch system to where the main monarchy promotes the murder of humans as lesser beings, because the Crepera monarchy canonically is a fascist monarchy. So while there are some political elements, they're more so hidden without the narrative. And the only reason I'm mentioning that the monarchy is fascist is more so because I have no other way to explain it. I'm gonna make sure I'm not as explicit on the politics of the book, because as an author, I think it would ruin interpretation if I just tell you what I meant. As much as I don't want to die, I quite appreciate death of the author, because if my view is all that's seen, the work can just become boring. I love interpretations and people seeing things that quote-unquote aren't there or were not meant to be there, because it's just fun. So, yeah, in the fascist monarchy, it kind of isn't a monarchy that celebrates death, given the whole nature of the species being between life and death. So he feels like all he can do when he is just out alone, no one to talk to, mentally broken, drained and alone, is to do what he was told to do his whole life, and that is to start killing people. If anyone near where I am heard that, bear in mind this is for a story. Anyways, it kind of gets worse from that point. his psyche starts to get more damaged. He gets more focused on almost this bloodlust, and by bloodlust I mean in a more literal way. Like, he starts to view carnage and sex as synonymous. He is a character that's technically on the ace spectrum, and that's not even done for representation reasons. That's done because the Creperum are designed to be a more asexual species than humans, and that gets more into making an alien psychology rather than trying to have any representation. So if any asexual people see his and other characters and get offended, he is not intended to be representation, so bear that in mind. So yeah, it's sort of like essentially his peak, aka his hormonal maturity, to where his sexual maturity happens to activate around the same time he's brought back, which is bad because he not only kills people, but he does lots of very, I'll just say, disgraceful actions involving death. His character is not intended to be a rapist, so bear that in mind. That's not exactly what I wanted, nor what I intended. What I will say is that he does not give a shit about someone's boundaries and likes to tease the person into submitting. So I will say he does lots of dubious consent things, which, I can't really say much on whether that makes him a rapist objectively, because that in itself gets subjective, but again, this is a fictional character, and bear in mind, huge explanation marks, villain, the bad guy. Keeping that in mind, because there are some people on the Twitter X now that would somehow be dumb enough to think that him doing these horrible things means that I condone them. Again, if I did, he would not be bad. So he is bad, these things are bad, never do these terrible things. So, yeah, he is into essentially breaking someone down using sex before he does violent actions. He primarily prefers to prey on women. However, none of these things are outright rape. Not to say that it's not rape in the sense that it's unconsensual, because, well, it kind of is, but in the sense to where it's not like he grabs someone and violently does a horrific act. He more so likes to tease someone and be lustful and essentially make them submit by making himself appear so desirable the person will want to fuck him. Of course, because not everyone is into that, there are many points to where that just doesn't happen. What I will say is meant to be more fucked up is that due to his more animalistic urges blurring with his beyond horrific morality, there are a few times to where he gets too desperate and he wants to really have sex with someone. It does get worse. Though canonically, he was always stopped before he gets that far, because the Creperum monarchy is a bit weird, where they're a very anti-rape society, despite having a huge problem of rape. I kind of made that in there as an allegory for things in society, though I'm not going to go much more deep than that, because if you're aware, you can kind of pick up the pieces on what I'm talking about. So yeah, it's kind of a thing to where, like, he is someone to where even as he seduces people, it's more in an alien and more haunting way. Like, sometimes he'll have certain noises that sound like some of the noises a dinosaur would make in Jurassic Park, but with a male voice that is kind of horny or sexual or erotic. And he just keeps doing this for a while, and like, it's not until the MacGuffin comes up, which is aka the main thing that he's interested in the story, which I'm not going to spoil, that he kind of changes from doing this. and then he gets less horny and more so just purely violent. And when he's purely violent, again, another analogy to Jurassic Park, he is sort of like those velociraptors. Clever girl, but this time it's clever boy, and a clever boy you really don't want to deal with because he will rip you apart if he finds you. And yeah, what's interesting though is that even though women are his preferred sexual prey, he often will hunt men just because he literally gets off to homophobia. Like, he's kind of fucked up to where if he kind of knows a straight man wouldn't be into it and kind of, like, wants to dominate them. Yeah, it's really fucked up. So, like, yeah, I would say that's very much the horror behind the man. As far as his design, his appearance, he's about 8 to 9 feet tall. He has a glowing, haunting sort of, like, faceless face, but one to where, even though there are no eyes, there's a bit of a void underneath the face, given how the species works. He has these little things which I call neck fangs, which are like spider fangs, but on the neck. His skin is pale, a mix between white and gray. He prefers to wear 18th century clothing and aesthetics, and on his back, he has several limbs that are like vaguely insectoid, as well as hands and legs, which technically look more tree-like by default, but he morphs them to look more human. He is technically a cannibal, but he doesn't eat his species often. He prefers to eat humans, and by eat, I mean unironically just eat. Though, he doesn't eat humans often because he thinks they're terrible. I mean prefer in the sense where he prefers to eat humans over his own kind. His most preferred prey of all would probably be a tie between buffalo and chickens. I have a joke to where he's just obsessed with chickens. Like, just eating them like he wants a chicken. Like, if it's Thanksgiving, it's one of the few times he wouldn't kill people, because instead of killing people, he would just be like, give me the chicken and you'll be spared. And they'll be spared. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say. I guess that is my character. If you are interested, then please read the story known as Daylight Never Waits. Anyways, that's about it, and goodbye.